Welcome, friends, to episode 246 of Color of Magic, a Magic Gaming podcast where we talk about all types of stuff that affect gamers at and away from their gaming tables and computers. I am your host, PowrDragn, and for 246 episodes, still got my main man, hopefully not dying of the heat in Texas, Brian Psionic. How's it going, dude?
Pretty good. Getting ready to enjoy the holiday weekend. Hopefully, this is not America's season finale.
Well, that's true. It might be, depending where you live. Dude, I'll tell you what, though. I seriously hope y'all are doing okay with the heat. Like, we
Yeah.
literally are having our first 2 hot days this year, and we're going to be somewhere between 88 and 91 for a couple days, and people are struggling up here. So yeah, I don't miss what I had to live through in the summers down there. Y'all got it way worse than we got it. But all right. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to remind you can support the show by going over to patreon.com/colormagic, and you can get a shout out just like Harrison Jones. Thank you, friend, for being a patron. But let's get into our lead story here, because this is, I guess the only way I can describe this as becoming a point of frustration, contention, something among modern players with the Modern Horizons set, which is a problem all in of itself because the set sells bananas, right? So they're going to keep making them. But what we've seen now is I'm pretty sure each set, each release so far, has had to have cards banned, which is already another issue because people are rushing out, buying the cards. The cards overperform in some major tournament, and then we end up having to ban some stuff. So you have people buying the cards, they're rushing out to buy the singles even, and then those are getting banned out in some cases weeks or couple weeks after the set release. The last set, I think we had to wait a little bit for stuff to get banned. But in this case, you also have the issue of it really dominated the Pro Tour this past weekend. I would say the number one deck had Nadu Winged Wisdom in it, which ridiculous card. You target it, and then you get 2 triggers to look at the top of your library. You either put a land into play or a card in your hand, which is bonkers, even if somebody tries to kill it. So the card, and all your creatures get that ability, which is wild. So it has an easy combo potential with some stuff that you can target it with equipment for 0. Then you get your next thing, and then that thing's for 0, and you just keep getting all these extra cards, right? The problem is it had a 60% win percentage among the top players in the world, right? So this would probably be way worse if you're at your local pool where the players aren't nearly as good and don't sideboard as well or whatever. So that's a real concern in and of itself. But even beyond that card in those decks, then you have the problem of the other top decks were also playing a bunch of stuff from Modern Horizons 3. So it was a bunch of Eldrazi stuff in some of the decks. There was Necro Dominance in another deck, right? And these were all decks that were making top 8s even. So it's like the players I speak to that play a lot of Modern, the issue now they're having is that they used to enjoy Modern because they could play old stuff, right? At this point, I don't know, I think Modern has like 15, 16 years worth of Magic cards you can play or something. Like, it's a long time. Probably more than that at this point. But now, like, for example, I have a Modern deck, I think just sitting over there actually, that I haven't played since probably 2018. And I just took it out for a day, played with some friends, whatever. That deck, even though it has really strong cards from 2018, probably is worthless today to play in the format. Now, the cards are still worse off because they can be played in other formats, but probably can't be played as a Modern deck. And I think that's where Modern players are starting to get frustrated, because if you have to update with a handful of cards, sure. But if you basically have to change the whole deck or not play it, it's just like, that's a rough feeling. Because at that point, it basically becomes like Standard, just with special set made just for Modern, effectively, with Modern Horizons. So like I don't know. I guess the conversation, Brian, is like, is there even a realistic solution in a situation like this? Because it sells so well. You know what I mean?
I mean, if you if you don't know, I certainly don't, because I don't play Modern, and it doesn't sound like for weirdness, doesn't sound like I want to.
Yeah, that's my other thing too. Like, I don't even want to mess with Modern right now. Like, I watched some of the games and, like, there was fun, intricate plays because it's like top level players. But I'm just looking at that going like, yeah, I wouldn't want to deal with that for a whole tournament's worth of play. Like, just not my jam. Like, wouldn't be for me. So yeah, so I don't know if this is there a winning solution combination here, because obviously we could say like, okay, well, just let's not make Modern Horizon sets anymore. But then when we look and go, oh, but it's selling as well as Lord of the Rings, and we know what they said about Lord of the Rings, like, so we can't not print it because that's not an option. So I don't know, man. I feel like hell, I hate to say it, but maybe a bunch of those players just moved to play in Pioneer, and then you ain't even got to worry about Modern Horizons cards. Like, maybe that's the solution. And if you want to deal with it and you like the format, it's still out there. It's there for you. But if not, you got Pioneer, Standard, Commander, hell, Legacy, whatever. If you want to play those formats, have fun. Like, because people ask me like, what would you do? And I was like, I don't even touch Modern. I haven't touched Modern. Like I said, I played one day with 2 or 3 games with some friends in 2018. Hadn't played probably for 4 years prior to that. So it's just not even a thing I touch. And I can see the influence of Modern Horizons just all over it, which is crazy. So yeah, and I think it becomes a financial thing for people too, right? Especially if you're going out like this week, players, even some of the pros have been saying like, don't buy these cards for this deck. Something in this deck is going to get banned, right? They're just out on socials telling people like, be aware this deck is too absurd. Something will be getting banned. Don't go buy these cards, which is good. At least people are just being upfront and honest about it. But you
That's
shouldn't.
good. Best players are at least looking out for people.
Yeah, exactly. But you shouldn't have that be one of the stories out of the Modern Horizons Pro Tour, right? It should be, let's celebrate these cards or these decks or these players or whatever. And the story is really just, all right, well, how many of these cards get banned? Hell, one of the discussions I saw was, okay, if we ban Nadu, do the Necro Dominant decks become too good? Which is another card from Modern Horizons 3, right? So it's like, if we get rid of that, is this the next big problem deck? And people are trying to figure out, like, if Nadu doesn't exist, can we sideboard enough to deal with this deck, and is it fine? Right? So that's a whole other can of worms. I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to figure it out. I will say that.
Right, you and me both.
Yeah, leave that to somebody else. But let's get into the soapbox here for a second. One of the things I've come to recently, because I still kind of troll the different Facebook groups, and I try to stay on different socials or whatever. I pop into local game stores, and there seems to be a trend of people, and we talked a little bit about it off the air, but and maybe because the more I talk about it, like, maybe it's because people are feeling financial pressure from economic things or whatever, but it seems like people have a hard time accepting that folks have hobbies just for the sake of having hobbies, that they're not trying to make money on, right? Like, not every hobby needs to be financially profitable or viable. Now, I get it. If you're struggling, you're like, okay, the only way I can do this thing I enjoy is if I can have it return some amount of money. I get it. But I've seen players be berated because they want to go buy a secret layer with their favorite artist stuff on it. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, maybe it's worth $10 less than they're paying for it, but they want the unique art because that's their favorite artist. Or the example I use about myself is when I was going in disc golfing and stuff, people were worried about, oh, well, you should do this so you can get into this tournament and do this thing. And I'm like, no, I'm just out here as an excuse to walk through the park and meet people and goof around, man. Like, or even for my content. I mentioned it before. I play Team Fight Tactics, right? I started out streaming a game every once in a while, but then I decided, you know what? This is just going to be a thing I do. I'm not going to make videos about it. I'm not streaming it. I'm just going to play it an hour or two at the end of the night, a couple times a week. And that's my time I put into it. It's my goof off, have some fun with game. And even then, when people find out I play, they're like, "Oh, I've never seen you play it online. You should be streaming that, or you should just like." And being real, I'm not any good, so nobody should be watching me to take any pointers from me, make content for it. So that's a whole issue of its own. But I'm just like, no, not everything has to be profitable.
Well, it's like we talk about on YouTube. You want to niche down to blow up. So if you're doing too
Yeah,
many things, you're not doing anything essentially.
Also true. But yeah, it's just, if somebody wants to go buy a booster pack, fine. Maybe they don't make all their money back on the pack, but if they're just collecting cards because they want to get a whole set or something, great. Let them do it. Right? Some people are in a position that that's how they want to disconnect. And that's okay. Like, we shouldn't have to have everything be profitable. And again, some of it, I get it. If you're in a situation where that's not an option for you and there's financial pressures, completely understand. I don't fault anybody for that. But we still have to have an understanding of, like, that's not everybody's situation. And it's okay for some people to just have a thing they enjoy that they like and they're not making any money on it.
So much of among nerds, we need to be letting people enjoy things. You don't have to like the Acolyte. Nobody is going to come to your house and force you to watch it if you don't want to watch it. But if somebody else enjoys it, I mean, don't berate them for enjoying it.
That's a good point. I mean, we've said it before on the show. Just let people enjoy things, man. Like, if it's not harming you or anybody else and people are just enjoying themselves, let it ride, man. Like, who cares? Like, it's weird to see people get mad, like, I can't believe you went and bought this or whatever. And it's like, okay, but they had an extra like $20 and they decided to go
Yeah.
spend it. Like, what harm was done in that? You know? Hell, if anything, it supports some other people having a job. Like,
Right?
so, like, who cares? The same way people get mad, like, I can't believe you spent $20 on Arena. It's like, okay, but they play Arena like 20 hours a week. It's fine for them to spend $20 on it. Like, it's not that big a deal. But yeah, we just gotta back off. Just, if people have hobbies, they're allowed to have hobbies. You don't have, hell, I would say, even if you as a person feel that you have to make money off of a hobby, I would ask you to decide if you really do need to or not. And again, if it's a financial situation you feel you need to, that's totally legit. But if you're not in that situation and you want to just do it for fun and keep it to yourself, and that's for you, that's your personal time, that's okay. But all right, that's all I got. What do you got, Brian?
All right. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about a controversy involving MTG Remy, who does parody videos on YouTube. And these are match related parodies, but apparently a while back he was doing some more political parodies. Some of them were apparently very, very far right wing. And apparently at one point he even did, I guess, I can't necessarily call it blackface, but he was playing Colin Kaepernick, and he clearly is not, I don't
Yeah.
know, he is clearly not of African American descent. He didn't, as I say, didn't paint his face or anything. Because for Colin Kaepernick, you don't have to. Colin Kaepernick is light skinned, as we
Oh
like to
yeah, he's a
say.
light skinned brother for sure.
Yeah. But still, it just it had an icky feeling to it. Because again, this is on I think Steven Crowder's show, and yeah, Steven Crowder's somebody who, if you have, well, yeah, Steven Crowder may not have any black friends. I don't know. That's a whole different thing. But his budget is enough to where he should be able to hire a black actor to play Colin Kaepernick if that's important to it. It's probably not important to it because we're talking about Steven Crowder. But yeah, this became, I guess, a kind of sort of controversy. Remy had to turn off his social media for a minute, but he is back uploading videos. And really, I guess I never saw anywhere that he addressed any of these past videos or anything like that. So I guess we're just going to keep it pushing, which for the PR playbook is absolutely the way I would advise somebody to do it. That's what they told Mel Gibson to do after his racist rant got caught on camera. So yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
put your head down. Don't get any more trouble. Move on to your next project. So from a PR standpoint, yeah, that is absolutely, I guess, is the right thing to do. Now,
Yeah.
from a moral standpoint, yeah, I would have loved to have seen him at least address some of the concerns of the community. But yeah, this is magic. I understand what's happening, and also shortly after this controversy, he apparently received his 100,000 view, which I forget what diamond or whatever that play button is for 100,000 views. Talk
Yeah.
about being completely on brand for large portions of Magic content in the Magic community to get caught in a race controversy, and then all of a sudden, hey, here's your reward for 100,000 views. So yeah,
Yeah, you know, silver play button, silver play button's a thing everybody's aspiring to get at a minimum. So I
yeah,
get it,
and so
but
he gets beat these charges like Rocky, as Jay-Z would say.
I
Hope
mean,
that's not too urban for people.
I'm
Actually,
with
I'm
you
lying. I
though.
don't care if it's too urban.
No, I'm with you. Like that's the right play. Just, you know, as much as we'd like to see it addressed, like the right play is just lay low. You know, like just we've seen it time and again. I mean, hell, just look at Drake. If Drake would have laid low and shut up, like no, but he keeps trying to come out and make weird videos and trying to say stuff at concerts. Like, dog, just let it go, man. Let it go. Like, you know, sometimes no action is the best action.
Yeah,
Sadly.
I would have again. I would have loved to see him respond. I'd love to see more people call him out until there was some kind of response. But we are dealing with the Magic community where there just really are only a handful of us that monitor these issues and that ask for these responses. So there just wasn't enough pressure for him to have to do anything really.
Yeah, and here's the reality too. You know, I do accept that people can change. You know, if you just say like, look, like we talked about before, if this is just where you thought it was a thing that you could help get a leg up in comedy, Hollywood, whatever it is he was aiming for at the time, cool. I get it. You know, we've said it before. We've all said and done dumb things in our 20s and hell, maybe even into my low 30s at some point, right? But again, I'm with you. Like, it would have been nice if it was just addressed, you know, even if it is just to say, like, I get it. I like that was idiotic, or maybe I shouldn't have done this, or whatever. And just, you know,
Yeah, because again, I don't care. Well, I mean, I care if you're right wing, but that's not a thing that I know is going to get anybody to
yeah,
stop
yeah, yeah,
watching
yeah.
your Magic videos as well. Because some
No,
people will, but for the most part, Magic. That's kind of why we started this show. Magic still, well, there have been inroads. Magic still, for the most part, trends very white. You're not gonna lose a whole lot of sway by being right wing.
no, no, not at all.
There's a whole Reddit that formed because the regular Magic Reddit did not allow them to be racist, sexist, whatever
Sure.
other ist you have enough. So there was
But again, I'm like with you though. It's like that doesn't seem to be reflected of his current stuff, whether it's on social media or you know his videos or whatever. So maybe, and I don't know, maybe he still feels that way. I don't know, it's possible, you know, but like he's at least not publicly presenting that way. So it would have been easy to just make a statement and be like, "Yeah, I get it," you know, young, dumb, you know, that was 12 years ago, 14 years ago, whatever it was, you know, just time to move on.
or it's somebody that does comedy. Hey, if you really thought those jokes were funny and you're willing to
Yeah.
stand by them, by all means, tell me why you thought those jokes were funny.
I mean,
When you
it's also,
do,
dude, you know as well as I do, comedy sometimes is also reflective of the moment and reflective of the time period. Like there are TV shows that were super popular that can't even get in syndication now, you know, because of some of the content in the joke. Hell, we've talked about it before, both being wrestling fans. There's a bunch of stuff in the Attitude Era,
oh yeah.
even on their own network on Peacock, they have to like bleep stuff out and delete stuff and whatever because like you can't even on Peacock you can't show that anymore.
Sheldon Benjamin just apologized because he did a horrible racist Asian voice when he was wrestling Yoshitatsu, and he
Oh, that's
didn't
true.
and he
That's true.
didn't want to do it, but he has writers. The writers are putting
Oh,
a
dude.
horrible racist monologue in his mouth, and then he's got to deal with that video's online and will be for eternity. So yeah,
Oh,
he's
dude. But we had DX and blackface.
right.
We had infinite like bra and panties matches or whatever the hell those things were, right? Like that was a crazy time. And it was one of the highest rated shows on television every
Yeah.
week. You know, so it's just like it's crazy. You know, the world changes, man. The world changes. But all right, let's talk about what we learned this week because there's a couple of things which are kind of interesting. One sad, one good. So you get to lead with the sad one this week.
All right, we told you a little while ago about Tales of Kenzera Zau, which is a new game. It's in the Metroidvania genre, and it's has a very African theme to it. It talks about kind of some things, it's really some heavy themes in terms of like death and trying to get over. I believe the main character has lost his father and is trying to figure out maybe some way to be able to bring him back through the adventure that he goes on in this game. And so I mean, some deep stuff. Got a lot of critical acclaim, great reviews, but also because of the subject matter, because it was really appealing to a minority of the audience. Got a lot of hate mail, a lot of hateful comments, a lot of a lot of feedback from the worst elements of the internet. Unfortunately, the developer has announced that they are going to have to start laying people off. Just so many. That's kind of where we are. And even games with a much bigger budget that feel like they're part of an established franchise are having problems keeping the lights on, getting the sales. So especially with a game like this that has already been under fire from all society's wrong element, this is the thing. I can't say I'm shocked by it. I can say I'm saddened by it, unfortunately.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I'm just wondering, we've talked about this a bit, but why are the goals so high and the costs so high in video games to make stuff profitable? Right. And I don't know the inner workings or why that is, but it seems like even games that we see are successful, people's jobs still are sometimes on the line, and so if you don't have a game that doesn't get for real critical acclaim, get some awards, do all this, there's a good chance you're probably out of a job in a year.
I mean, Hi-Fi Rush got some of the best reviews of any game in the past year, and now that studio's getting shut down because at the end of the day, it just didn't sell enough copies. So it's
Which is wild. Like all these people say, "Oh, this game's great. Everyone should check it out," whatever, and then still doesn't sell enough. And I feel like we hear that so often, a
yeah, it's
couple
sad.
times a
We're to the
year.
point where being an award-winning game doesn't get you anything in terms. Rumbleverse, I think, won Fighting Game of the Year at a couple of awards shows, and no longer exists because it didn't make enough money. And I guess in that case, how much money is enough money? Well, at Epic, the comparison is to Fortnite. If you're not making Fortnite money, you're unfortunately probably not worth not worth the server, essentially.
Yeah, which is crazy because Fortnite's always a top 3 game, top 5 game,
Yeah.
So we're almost saying that, like, hey, if you make a game, for sure if it doesn't crack the top 10, but maybe even if it doesn't crack the top 5, you might still be out of a job. Like, that's crazy.
And the folks that let me wait, pull up I had the studio name, but Surgent Studios. Yeah, they're obviously trying to get people placed. They want to figure out how to continue this franchise. Published by EA, so really, you would think they had had enough backing to be able to get something done. Of course, EA is having some problems right now too with several of their game franchises. So it's a tough time right now in the industry for pretty much everybody, really.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're in a state where, one, there's a ton of entertainment options, right? That's already the first
Definitely
issue.
true.
And we've talked about it before. I mean, it's hard to get into any level of gaming right now because there are just juggernauts in each of the
Yeah.
spaces.
We've
Where they're
also
talking about,
talked about, like how just games such as Call of Duty, Madden. I mean, if you're trying to play those competitively or even just to, maintain your rank or just be good enough to play with your friends and not weigh the team down, the amount of hours
oh,
to
sure.
so many people really are only able to play one or two games because they're trying to, I Call of Duty, I understand. You figure like, okay, yeah, if I don't play a shooter for a couple of days, I can absolutely see my reflexes slowing down. I find if I don't play Madden for a couple of days, all of a sudden I'm not reading defense as well as I used to and throwing it, which seems weird to me. But I guess at the end of the day, some of those skills are similar, where you need to be, especially
Oh,
once
well,
you get
not
to the
just
higher
that,
rank.
but the games get updated throughout the season and DLC comes out and then they
Also true.
up
If
the
you're playing,
intelligence
yeah,
on the movement and so if you haven't been playing for 2 months and you miss 1 or 2 downloads, like, you haven't adjusted like everybody else.
yeah, or hey, just
That's
haven't
real.
spent enough money on new players in the case of Ultimate Team Mode, which
Well,
is
that's
what I'm
also
primarily
true,
running.
right? But
Like,
yeah,
hey,
it's a
your opponent has all 99s. Your receiver's out. Your receiver just can't get free because he's got Hall of Fame Deion Sanders on him, and you got
yeah,
Jerry Rice's cousin Clem out there trying to get a break runner out to get free. It's not going to
for
work.
real. No, it's a tough time, man, and I don't know if that just means we're just gonna see fewer video games eventually coming out because it's just hard to make them profitable. Are we gonna see more license-based games that already come in with a fan base? Or do studios just have to get crafty and find a way to make games that just don't have such high budgets? I don't some combination of the 3 maybe, but I don't know. I mean, I think Nintendo's had the right play of like, "Hey, we know these licenses work. We're gonna go with these as our leads. We'll bring in some others every once in a while, see if one cracks into popularity," but they seem to stick within a certain budget, certain look, whatever, and it works. Maybe everybody else is gonna have to adopt that. Because hell, they're still selling a crap ton of the Switch, and I guess there's a Switch 2 coming at some
Yeah.
point, and apparently people are already excited about that, so I don't know. But here's an interesting thing I found out, and it was actually reported by Dexerto, which is pretty cool because, they report a lot of different gaming news, but we talked about it on the show before about AI moving really fast and people using different people's likenesses and, all this. Well, apparently YouTube is taking notice and they're apparently fast tracking some type of options to where if somebody sees them or their properties, whatever, being used falsely in a AI manner, that you can, I guess, more quickly petition to have it taken down. Which, thank you, YouTube, because that's a thing that people are going to need, especially in the modern world of how people are using AI. But we've seen before where people have made basically body doubles of different streamers. We've seen stuff where people tried to use Mr. Beast's likeness to scam people, just all types of things that are going on. And it's kind of cool on the one hand to see that like even the big companies are saying like, hey, we're acknowledging how fast this is developing and moving that we've got to prioritize this over some other things. But it's also kind of sad that they have to look at that and say like, well, we have to prioritize this over other things. It's becoming a big issue. I'm hoping it also leads to though people just outright being banned on the platform of just like, hey, if you're found doing this, you should just be done. Now they haven't said that outright, and I'm sure there's legal stuff they have to write up first before they do it or whatever, or else they open themselves up to litigation. But I hope that's the end result because there's really no spot where that is a good idea. You know what I mean? Like
I mean, it's
there's
gonna be like trying to catch Nigerian prince scammers. I mean, you just go somewhere, set up another account, and you're back in business doing the same thing. To some extent, I'm sure they can track certain IP addresses, but if it's a company, it's big enough to have made a little bit of money from their scam, they can
oh yeah.
just they know where to go. That's a reason Nigerian prince scams are apparently still a thing, is because there's some people actually, 1 out of 100 people actually fall for those scams, and they get enough money off of those 1 or 2 people to finance the rest of the stuff.
Dude, speaking of okay, crazy side story. This is a story from a couple of years ago, but you said that and I just remembered. But there's this crazy story where this dude ends up finding out he's gonna get this pile of money or whatever because relatives died or whatever the crazy thing was. But he's got to go to this area he's got to take a trip to, I guess, his hometown, whatever, sign some paperwork or whatever. Well, turns out, like his woman he was with ends up killing him because yeah. Like, and I guess she tried to do it on the sly or whatever, but she thinks she's gonna get some amount of the inheritance or whatever. But she also was afraid he was gonna leave her because he's getting this big pile of money. And then the crazy part to the whole thing is that he wasn't even gonna get any money because none of it even existed. The person was just trying to get him there to scam him or whatever to begin with. And I'm just like, oh, that's the worst.
That's a
So she
Twilight Zone right there.
yeah, so she ends up going to jail for one, a death didn't need to happen at all, but killing somebody over a thing that never even existed. I was like, that's just crazy. But yeah, scammers, man, I'm with you. That's a crazy thing. And AI, sadly, is making that easier for a lot of
Yeah.
people. And I get it because you already have people who don't understand technology, right? And now you're making it where the technology is pretending to be other things, right? Or other people or other services. And that makes it even harder to discern if you don't know what to look for or to listen for. Because I feel like even now when I watch a video, I can still understand when somebody's using like an AI voiceover, because the inflection's not quite right or the
Yeah.
pacing slightly off or whatever.
Or they're
But
just, it's something weird. Like, why is The Rock trying to sell me avocado
yeah.
body balm? This don't sound legit.
Hey, dude, The Rock has a shampoo in his like body product line or whatever, and he's bald. So if I would have seen that pop up and I didn't know, I'd have thought that
Right.
was fake for real.
Also, they do a lot of ads overseas that they would never do here because the money is
True.
outrageous.
Very true. That is a real thing. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing. But good on YouTube trying to be a leader in this space. Trying to make it a thing to make it harder for scammers to take advantage of people. So I hope that continues. But let's get into a couple of interesting bits of news here. All right, we mentioned BlackGirlGamers before, who are doing great work out there, really growing their brand. So props to them. But I found out, and I didn't even know this was a thing, that they have a whole, I guess what they call an online summit, that they get a whole pile of speakers. They cover like, I think 15 different subjects, everything from just, I think there's fashion in gaming and how that works and how it's come up. They're doing one on if you're a creator, how to charge for different things, how to present your stuff. There's others on just like, hey, how to disconnect from gaming in a mentally positive thing, right? How do you recharge, right? That's a thing. So they're covering a lot of different topics. And it's kind of cool because I didn't know, one, that this existed, but it's kind of cool because they're covering a lot of subjects that you don't see covered at a lot of other gaming conventions.
Yeah, sounds like one of this presentation called "New Playbooks in Gaming" is going to feature. They're going to talk about equity and access. Kind of moving beyond the typical diversity 101, as they term it, impact and innovation, culture and authenticity, and then also advocacy and allyship. For people who want to help but have absolutely no idea what to do to help. So yeah, that absolutely, because that happens all the time. Where people, they want to support Black creators, they want to support creators in marginalized communities, and they just don't really know. Okay,
Yeah.
what should I be doing? So this is going to be a great event to learn some of those things at. And as you mentioned, they have done all kinds of great work in the space.
I also give them credit too. There's stuff in there for protecting your mental health while gaming. That's a subject. You know, growing a grassroots movement, right? That's in there. So like lots of cool stuff. Again, that I don't think we see covered on other things.
Yeah, this
Uh
is why we do what we do.
yeah. I want to say if you want to check them out, you can look up Black Girl Gamers on Twitter. They've got everything linked there. It'll take you to the site if you want
There's a
to
Twitch
know.
channel also. They are pretty much
True.
on all the social medias of note right now.
But yeah, and it looks like a good spread of speakers too. So should be fun if you want to check it out. It's on August 3rd, so you have plenty of time if you want to set aside some time. And it looks like everything is happening mostly mid afternoon Eastern time. So it'll be morning to mid afternoon if you're on the West Coast. But the first one's at 12:45 Eastern, and it looks like the last thing finishes up at about 7 o'clock Eastern. So a good spread of stuff that everybody can check out and kind of educate yourselves. Would be fun for a lot of people, I think. And then we kind of got bombarded, is the only word I can think of, with information from Wizards of the Coast over this past week. Because with, I guess I wouldn't say Pro Tour, but really Command Fest, or not actually, not that, Magic Con Amsterdam, they had to make a bunch of announcements, right? That's become the thing whenever you do big conventions or whatever. People want to hear news and whatever. And this has been a thing. We saw the same thing in Chicago early this year, so we weren't surprised. But the amount of news was kind of surprising because we got a bunch of Bloomberg previews, which everybody expected because that's the next set to come out in from the time of this, I guess like 3-4 weeks. But we also got a bunch of previews for Dustborn, which everybody's like, oh, well, okay, this is cool, I guess. But then we also found out Dustborn comes out. Basically, I believe the pre-release is the last weekend in September. So that means you're only going to have like 8 weeks, really, between the release of Bloomburrow and the release of Dustborn, their official release dates, which is 7 or 8 weeks. But it's a pretty small window, and I wasn't really sure why that was a thing.
I
because
mean, you
it's
know why? More money.
sure, but it's like, could we have moved it back like 2 weeks and you still would have had the majority of October if you wanted to get Dustborn in during spooky season or whatever? Like, I get that. But like, give Bloomberg like a little more room to breathe. You know, it's like that seemed it
But
felt a little
that's
off.
not the business model anymore. They're just
Oh,
product
definitely not.
on top of product on top of product.
But I also would have been fine with Bloomberg being 2 or 3 weeks sooner as well. Like, you know, maybe that's only a month separated from Modern Horizons 3, but it's kind of different audiences anyway for those for the most part. So wouldn't have been that big of a deal, I don't think. But the cards look sweet. I
But you said
mean,
they've made it virtually impossible to collect everything unless you really have the wealth to do and the wealth and the
yeah.
time because it's just
And I'm
bam,
okay
bam,
with that.
bam, bam.
But for me, it's like I would rather the two sets that don't have the same core audience in Modern Horizons 3 and Bloomburrow maybe being a little closer, and then putting more of a gap between the two that are very much in the standard space. Give them another like 2 weeks, possibly. But I don't make those decisions, obviously. But then that wasn't the only news we got. We also got, hey, there's this thing called Foundations that's coming out. And all we got was like a picture of a Llanowar elf, and then later they showed 3 different cards, I think. But the concept here is that it sounds like, and I'm just saying sounds like because we don't have all the details yet, but it's going to be a core set that is standard legal for 5 years. They said through at least 2029. And now that language of at least 2029 also sounds like that's maybe when the refresh is happening. And some number of those cards will likely be in the next foundation set, and some of them will get replaced or whatever. So there's some that may just be permanently in standard for a very long time. But it's a set that also doesn't feel like you might need to buy it unless the set has like 50% new cards, 50% old cards. Now, if it's like 80% old, 20% new, you may be able to just pick up a couple singles if you need it. But it's kind of a weird product, right? Because we just went to, hey, standard's 3 years long. But now there's going to be a set that's like, but this one's 5 years long. So it's like, okay, this is a little bit weird. But I also get the concept of if there's old cards that are familiar, that's good for players coming back to the game, right? They have a basis of things they already understand, things they're a fan of. Maybe you put a bunch of theme stuff in there, a bunch of merfolks, angels, dragons, elves, whatever. So, you know, the popular creature types and tropes or whatever. And that would kind of make sense. But also, if you have to take some time off and maybe one of the sets you like rotated out of standard or whatever in that time, you come back in, you still have a big chunk of cards that you already own that are still going to be standard legal. So having those as a basis to build on for your next thing isn't bad. So I kind of get what they're doing. It's just tough with like the other messaging coming so back to back over the last couple of years. I think is kind of the problem there. But I don't know. How do you feel about foundations even existing?
And it sounds like Jumpstart apparently is going to be a part of this now too.
Yeah, that's what I was reading, which I'm okay with Jumpstart if it's just on a core set product like this or only every once in a while. I think where we got in trouble was every set had a Jumpstart thing for whatever that year stretch was or whatever. And people are just like, yeah, we don't need Jumpstart all the time. Like, we don't need all these extra commons and uncommons or whatever just to have a set where we're only chasing like 6 rares or something. So for this, I'm okay with it. Because again, it's going to be the starter kind of jumping on space for players. And that's okay, I think, for a spot like for Jumpstart to exist. Because Jumpstart's best trait, I would say, is that it's actually good for returning players, right? You know how to play Magic already, but you don't have decks. You want to grab a couple for you and your friend to just play against each other, some quick games. All right,
I mean,
cool.
it's Smash Up essentially, and
Yeah,
Smash Up is one of our favorite games in the Allen
that's
household.
exactly
Yeah,
what it is.
we love it.
It's
Hey, you're gonna take some pirates and some angels and smash them together and see if they work.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. And that game's super popular with like, I don't know, 6 different expansions or something or whatever.
Oh, we
So,
it's I've lost count at this point. We probably got six, and we just
well,
started
there
playing
you
a
go.
couple of years ago.
Yeah, so I'm good with it there. I don't have a problem. I'll just be interested to see what the ratio is of old cards to new cards. I think that's going to be the thing for me. But then that wasn't all the news. We got one more piece that got slipped in there, and it was that there's going to be Arch Enemy product again, sort of. Kind of how they did previously, where they had different planes in the commander decks. The way I read it was that the Arch Enemy cards will come in the either 4 or 5 commander decks they're going to have available for Duskmorn, I believe. So when you buy those, they'll have some section of the Arch Enemy cards in there, and then if you have them all, you get a new Arch Enemy deck or whatever.
And what
And
was I completely what is Arch Enemy? I
yeah, so
forgot
for
what that
people
even is.
yeah, people that don't know, it's basically so you can play one person as the bad guy against up to 4 other players. So the idea is you get a deck of cards that gives certain things that happen throughout the game or whatever that the main person has active. So you can kind of balance a 4-on-1 or 3-on-1 type
Okay.
situation, right? So just to give you a variation of a way to play commander instead if you don't want to play
Yeah.
free for all, it's like okay,
It's
we can
like
play this for the
it's a
goal.
Marvel United, that type
Yeah,
thing. Or if you played the extremely short-lived wild card game, there was a raid thing, or you could be
yeah,
Onyxia or
exactly.
somebody, and everybody else could try to defeat you. So yeah, something along the okay.
And one of the fun things is like if you're in a situation where maybe your deck is better than your friends or you're a better player than your friends, it's like okay, they can play 3-on-1 and like it's a little more competitive for everybody, right? So it's just another way to play Magic, but I was kind of surprised they didn't just make an Arch Enemy product that you could just buy. But on the other hand, hey, good on them for just including it in commander decks that people tend to buy anyway.
Yeah, and
So,
maybe they didn't feel like enough people would play Arch Enemy by itself to warrant a separate product
yeah,
line.
probably. But yeah, it's cool. So you kind of get a nice little bonus in your commander product and another way to play, which is kind of cool. So credit to them, thumbs up on that. It was just weird that it kind of just got like shoved in with all the other news where I almost
Well,
didn't
because
even see
there's
it was
so
there.
much. It was just news over. Which I mean, I guess you don't want to have nothing going on, but good lord, this is a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, hell, I feel like we see this at every game convention now. It's just like any convention going on. It feels like you might as well get on your computer and check the first day or two because there's going to be 15 announcements of different things happening. But speaking of a positive thing that I just remember that wasn't in our show notes that I think we should talk about real briefly is I don't know if you saw it, but the Player of the Year award is now going to be named after Kai Boudet.
I
Uh,
did see that.
he unfortunately has been fighting cancer. My understanding is for somewhere between 1 and 2 years now, and it's just taken a turn for the worse at this point, and sounds like it's terminal or at least heading that direction. And they wanted a way to honor him, which I thought was really cool. So, because he's 1 or 1A, depending on how you view Magic history of players of all time. And everybody was happy. Nobody seemed to be remotely bothered that they made this move. It was a very classy move from Wizards to honor, like I said, arguably the greatest player who's ever played your game from at least from an accolade standpoint. You know, I think that much is true. But yeah, just sucks. Cancer, terrible. It sucks that hell, he's not even as old as I am. So it's terrible when you see cancer. It's already bad enough when it takes somebody older, but it's way worse even when you see it take somebody who's younger that easily had another hell 25, 35 years ahead of them. That's tough. But yeah, credit to Wizards, round of applause for a real classy move. Not
Definitely.
something that we see very often or even have those situations come up, but it's cool that they made the move because I don't think anybody expected it. And except for Huey Jensen when he made the announcement at the Pro Tour, before the top 8 started, they didn't really go parading it around. It was mostly just like, hey, here's a thing we're doing to honor a player, which I thought was cool. But all that being said, let's go to the dinner table because this is one I don't know your answer to, actually. But the question is, what was the first game that you played competitively? Video games or tabletop? We're not going to talk about like sports and other stuff, but video games or tabletop games.
I didn't play any.
Well, I played a few, but that you played competitively other than Magic because Magic's been around so damn long at this point. So yeah, I don't know what was that game for you if it wasn't Magic.
Overpower, I believe, was the first one.
Ah, overpower. Oh,
Yeah.
bruh.
Right. For anybody, and it's probably probably the majority of our listeners will have no idea what that is, but it was a Marvel card game. Well, it started out as Marvel. They eventually added
Yeah.
DC, Image, and pretty much most of the comic book companies that were relevant at the time. But yeah, it started out as a Marvel card game around the right, I guess early to mid '90s.
Yeah, it would have been like 90, I want to say like 95 to like 98 or so, 99, something like that
Yeah,
in
that
that
sounds
window.
about right. Yeah, and I use term competitively loosely because it wasn't it was never really much of a pro tour setup because I mean even competitive card gaming was really still in its infancy at that point. Plus, I was still living in Shreveport, so the community was
Yeah.
really 5 or 6 people. But we did traveled to a couple of tournaments.
That's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't even have thought, man. I almost forgot about overpower.
I think a lot of people have.
Well, yeah, that's true. I tell people, man, I have forgotten so many games. And it's so funny when somebody brings them up, and then immediately I remember, like, oh, I remember the rules of that game, or I remember this quirky thing about it, or this thing in the rule book that wasn't clarified. So all the games were weird. Like it's crazy to remember that level of stuff. Cause man, I probably have demoed 100
Yeah,
trading card games over the years, it
I'm
feels like.
sure I've written about probably at least that many.
Yeah, I was thinking about this pretty hard because it's hard for me to remember, because I played Magic even all the way back in like high school. But I think I didn't really, again, tabletop and video game stuff. I don't think I played anything competitively in either of those spaces before Magic. I played a lot of things, but I don't think everything I did competitively otherwise was like track, basketball, whatever. Until probably when I first got to start trying Madden competitively. Because I played like every Madden, but I think the first time I played it competitively, what really wasn't even until like 2000 ish.
Yeah, because it took a minute for people to even have the idea, like, oh wait, you could have tournaments for this. For years it was just, hey, you gather around your own Super
Yeah.
Nintendo, maybe a couple of your friends play, and then hey, if it gets really competitive, maybe y'all start putting some. But it took a minute for people like, hey, wait, a lot of people are doing this. We could actually do some kind of organized thing.
Yeah, and then I wanna say around, like, '04 to '05, might be a little fuzzy there, but then they started doing, like, their tournament tour that was going to actual stadiums. So you'd go to, like, Arlington to Cowboy Stadium, and you would play against whatever, like, 1,000 other Madden players that showed up or whatever. And I was, like, mid-level alright, I wasn't anything crazy. But and then I talked about it before on the show where, playing online, I started to rank up and then realized, like, hanging around like the top 2,000, 1,000 for a while, like that's still
Yeah.
pretty impressive. But
Then
then
you
when
get
I,
to that point where you're like, oh my god, this person is just everything
oh
you throw
yeah,
pick.
oh dude,
That if you get the pass off, it's picked.
like I said, when I
You
when
might
I
not even get the pass off.
I finally broke into the top 100, I thought I was it. I was like 78, 79, something like that. I'm like, this is gonna be it, and I just got dusted in my next game by a dude. I think he was like 17th or something, top 20, and it wasn't even close. I mean, the valley of skill was still gigantic, and I was like, bruh, like I've been playing, and I had like a crisis personally because I'm like, man, I've been playing this game a lot. I played Madden at that point, for like 10 years. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
how is this, I'm like, where you start trying to convince yourself, like, well, was he cheating? Like, was this a thing? Like, because you can't accept that, like,
Right.
you just got beat that bad. But then that's what I realized, like, nah, there's just people who play. Wait, I think what cemented it for me was when I played Mario Kart online. The first time when the Wii came out, right? And you could play
Yeah.
Mario Kart with people from around the world. And it, for real, I think took me like 20 races to even place in the top three. And I'm like, you think you're good at Mario Kart. Get on
Yeah.
and play with a bunch of other people that are also good at Mario Kart. And you start learning all the little things you didn't know, or like how people are getting ahead of you. Man,
Because
the
we
people that
talked
are good are
about
good.
how it's just, everything has its meta game. And again, there are people that all they play is Mario Kart.
Oh yeah.
They don't play, they don't take time to play anything else. They know all the every game has those people where, yeah, that's all they do.
I always tell people, like, if you think you're good at the game, try to find the best person you know at the game. And then each time, once a year, try to find somebody you think is better than them. And each conversation you have with them, you will realize what you don't even know. Like even in Mario Kart, there's people like, oh no, well, if you ride next to here, like your will a bump on this thing, and then you'll gain like so much speed or what. I'm like, how do you like how do you know this? Right? Like,
Right.
when you've raced that track 1,000 times, you're like, I never even noticed that was on there. Like I assumed I'd have a wreck, but it's like, nope, you hit it with your back tire and then boom. Right? Like, who
Yeah.
knows this stuff? Right?
Oh, one of the PlayStation Plus's free games last month was FC24. I said, well, if you give me a game for free,
Sure.
especially with the sports game, I'm going to try it. What I know about soccer, even after covering soccer in high school for 5 or 6 years, what I know about soccer is still just not. And then to try to play FIFA online or now FC24, yeah, I really didn't realize how much I didn't know. I saw somebody's video there talking about the way how you run diagonally so you get a better angle on your passes. Like, oh my God, are you serious? Right? It's
Oh,
just,
dude. Not only that, like because I was helping somebody with their YouTube channel and they were covering one of the soccer games. And he's trying to explain like the 2-3-2 lineup versus the
yes,
three two
all of
four
that.
something. And I'm like,
Yeah,
what? And he's like, yeah, you do this because this and this stops these things, and you could have these guys closer to the goal. I'm like, oh my God. Like
yeah.
that's why
It's
they're better than I am.
exactly. I've already decided, like, yeah, I'm gonna play for fun. I'm gonna, try to get my team. But yeah,
Yeah.
tournaments, no, I already know that it just no. It's just
Yeah. The people who are good, they're good because they're hardcore into it. They're fans, they dedicate to it. I try to tell people like there's a reason you don't see very many players that are good at like a large swath of games. Like they're really good at one, they might be like pretty good at another one, and that's probably it. They'll play some others and be competitive, but they're really good at one or two, and that's it. Because that gets all their time and effort, and energy, and whatever, right? That's how they're good at those. Like it's rare that you see somebody that's 3+ games that they're top tier at. Like there's just not a thing. But yeah, once I got waxed at Madden, I decided, yep, this is a thing I know. I'm just gonna have to play for fun because I will
yeah.
never be a top tier Madden player.
I guess I'll probably be able to. I feel like stack three because I'm assuming, like I said, right now, they've reached legend in Madden, top 50 in WWE, and of course, I'm assuming NCAA football. Well, there will be some differences. There will be at least
Yeah, I'd
enough.
assume you could figure that out.
Yeah, enough similarities with Madden, where I should be able to. I would think get to a high rank in that, and yeah, it's
So
yeah.
to be
I'm proud of
fair, two of
myself.
those are kind of the same game.
But I mean, there is again college football and pro football. There's a
That's
lot that's
true.
different.
That's
Because
true.
they do it, they do a lot. For example, like, depending on what mode you're playing, you got to recruit your players. We
Also
did a
true.
me and a group of friends of mine. We did a whole like, well, not franchise, but I forget campus mode or whatever, where we all coach colleges, and you don't just start with the players. You got to explain, hey Brian, why shouldn't I go play for Jason? I don't
Yep.
think you're going to give me enough play time. Well, no, no. See, Jason's college isn't very good academically. You need to come over here, and different players will have different. Like, some players actually care about their grades. Some people, they just want to, it's like as in real life, there are players that care about different things. Some people, they just want to play. They don't care if your team's good. They want to make sure they're getting the playing time.
That'll be interesting. But yeah, so there you go. Like some games that people may not have thought about for a minute. But all that being said, why don't you everybody they can find you on social media, Brian?
All right. I am Brian Sonic on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.
And you can find me everywhere at PowrDragn, PowrDragn. And man, with all the new stuff coming out, expect there are going to be a lot of things for Bloomborough, for Dustmorn. And if you're looking for stuff to be ready for the new standard, I have a whole playlist of stuff I'm putting out daily of just rotation ready stuff. So you don't have to go and waste your wild cards on things that are going to rotate. But man, this was a hell of a show. But I got to tell you, as a reminder, wherever you're watching, whenever you're watching, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Or if you're just listening, remember to take care of yourselves and your family. Remember to be awesome. And most importantly, be awesome to each other.